Hey guys, tonight we're stepping straight into Kyoto during the Edo period, a city where the air smells faintly of cedarwood and simmering soy sauce, and where every narrow street seems to twist just enough to hide what's around the corner. You find yourself standing on the packed dirt road of the city's merchant quarter. The sun is low, casting warm amber light across the wooden facades of shops, each front propped open like a stage for daily life. Somewhere behind you, a vendor's bell jingles lazily, trying to catch the attention of a passerby, and up ahead, two children dart between barrels of pickled vegetables like foxes on a dare dot. It's beautiful. Yes, but don't be fooled. Between the rigid class rules, the fire-prone wooden buildings, and a justice system that's more swift than fair, you probably won't survive this without at least a few awkward run-dash-ins. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're here right now, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far these little nighttime journeys travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. First thing you notice is the soundscape. Temple bells echoing from somewhere uphill, their low chime weaving between the sharper calls of merchants hawking dried persimmons. Wooden cart wheels rumble over uneven stones, the rhythm breaking whenever they hit a rut. The air is damp from an earlier rain, and your sandals kick up the smell of earth with every step. Kyoto in the Edo period is both a cultural capital and a political tightrope. The shogun rules from Edo, modern-day Tokyo, but the emperor still resides here in Kyoto, a living reminder of ancient authority. This balance gives the city a peculiar rhythm, part reverent tradition, part lively commerce. Historians still argue whether the city's prosperity during this era came more from imperial prestige or from the sheer stubbornness of its merchant class. As you move further along the main street, you pass rows of Machiya-narrow wooden townhouses, built long and thin, like someone stretched a single floor plan into infinity. Their fronts are open for business, a brush shop with bristles hanging like foxtails in the breeze, a tofu stand steaming with fresh soy curds, and a paper seller's stall where delicate lanterns sway slightly in the damp air. The interiors are dim, lit only by the soft orange glow of oil lamps. A local man with a shaved pate and a knot of hair at the back, your first chunning or townsman, stops to give you a once-over. Not unfriendly, but definitely curious. Foreigners are practically unheard of here, thanks to the shogunate's sakoku, closed country policy. You nod politely, keeping your hands visible and your expression mild. One wrong move and you'll be the latest strange tale told over sake tonight. Sudden shout erupts behind you too. Apprentices are chasing after a runaway chicken that seems to think the market stalls are an obstacle course. It dashes under your legs before vanishing into the vegetable stand. The seller groans, but doesn't even pause in his sales pitch. Apparently, this sort of chaos is just another Tuesday in Kyoto. You duck into a side street, narrow enough that your elbows almost brush the walls. Overhead, the upper floors of houses leaned forward slightly, their dark wooden lattice framing curtained windows. Somewhere, the faint smell of incense drifts from a Buddhist altar, blending oddly with the sharper tang of fermenting miso from a nearby barrel. You catch sight of a fire, lookout tower in the distance, a tall wooden structure where men scan the horizon for any sign of smoke. Fires are Kyoto's most feared disaster. In a city built almost entirely from timber and paper, one stray ember can erase an entire neighborhood in hours. In fact, a quirky little detail. Some families keep their most precious belongings in large ceramic jars buried halfway in the ground, hoping they'll survive a blaze. Walking on, you spot a samurai on the far end of the road, his two swords tucked neatly into his belt, his hakama swaying slightly with each step. You instinctively shift to the side to let him pass. Commoners are expected to yield the path. His gaze doesn't linger on you, but your shoulders relax only after he's gone. By the time you reach the Kamo River, the air has cooled. A few fishermen linger on the banks, their lines glinting in the last scraps of sunlight. The water moves slowly, reflecting the colors of the sky in lazy ripples. Somewhere nearby, a shamisen begins to play a soft, plucked melody that makes you want to stand still and listen forever. And that's when you realize you're here now, in Kyoto, in an era where every sound, smell, and glance carries meaning, and where the streets themselves seem to hum with centuries of stories. The city is ready to show you more, but only if you can keep up. The next morning, you wake up to the sound of a wooden clapper hayoshiji being struck somewhere down the street. The sharp clack-clack echoes between the narrow walls, serving as a polite but unmistakable alarm clock for the neighborhood. You're sleeping in the back of a machiya, the air heavy with the mingled scent of tatami mats and last night's charcoal embers. Sunlight filters through the shiji paper doors in pale, diffuse squares, and you can just make out the muffled voices of early risers moving through the front room. Your host, a wiry merchant with a perpetually amused expression, is already up. He slides the door aside and offers you a shallow ceramic cup of roasted barley tea mujica. It's bitter, smoky, and exactly what you need to wash away the grogginess. He tells you there's rice gruel for breakfast, with a sliver of pickled plum if you're lucky. In Edo period Kyoto, breakfast is not about indulgence. It's about starting the day without fainting halfway through. You step outside, slipping your feet into straw sandals. The street is busier now, though not with frantic energy. It's a slow, deliberate sort of bustle. Women in plain indigo-dyed cotton kimono walk with baskets balanced on their hips. A few men in short work jackets head toward the river, and somewhere a dog scruffier than you'd expect sniffs suspiciously at a basket of dried sardines. Your first destination is the neighborhood well. Water here is communal, and you join a small queue of people waiting their turn. A young apprentice in a leather apron is filling buckets for his master's workshop. chatting idly with a girl in a wimple-like tenugui wrapped around her head. She tells him about a kabuki play she saw last night in the Shiu district, describing how the lead actor moved like a spirit between worlds. Historians still argue whether kabuki in the Edo period was a subversive art form or simply the Netflix of its day, but either way, it's wildly popular. You shoulder your way to the front and draw a bucket, the rope creaking against the pulley. The water is cool and faintly metallic. In a city of over 300,000 people, keeping water clean is a constant concern. A quirky little trick locals swear by? Tossing persimmon peels into the water barrels to keep it fresh. Whether it works or not is debatable, but it certainly makes for a better aroma than algae. With your bucket sloshing, you head back through the streets. The shops are now fully open. You pass a lacquerware seller, his wares gleaming like captured. Midnight under the morning sun, and a paper fan shop where each fold seems painted with a different season. There's a rhythm to Kyoto commerce that feels almost choreographed. No one shouts here the way they might in Osaka. Instead, merchants rely on repeated greetings, gentle persuasion, and occasionally a bit of theatrical display. Turning a corner, you nearly collide with a pair of Buddhist monks walking in single file, each holding an alms bowl. They wear straw hats so wide they hide their faces, a silent reminder of humility and anonymity. As they pass, a housewife steps out to drop a small handful of coins into one bowl. The monk bows silently, the brim of his hat dipping low. You follow. The crowd toward Nishiki Market, the beating stomach of Kyoto. It's a long, covered street lined with food stalls, so close together you could smell your way through blindfolded. Dried bonito flakes curl in the air like wood shavings, while barrels of pickles release a tang so sharp it prickles your eyes. You spot skewers of grilled eel, stacks of tofu skins drying in the sun, and something that looks suspiciously like tiny preserved squid whole, eyes and all. A young boy tries to tempt you with a sweet made from rice flour and sweet bean paste, dusted in roasted soybean powder. You take a bite, and it's soft, chewy, and faintly nutty, exactly the kind of thing you could accidentally eat 20 of. Your host laughs when you admit this. Apparently, death by machi is a running joke here. Not because it's truly fatal unless you're elderly and careless, but because people seem unable to stop at one. Leaving the market, you notice a narrow alley branching off, marked by a tiny wooden sign. Curiosity wins, and you follow it until you find a hidden courtyard garden. There's a small pond with fat carp drifting lazily under lily pads, and the only sound is the drip of water from a bamboo pipe. A middle-aged woman in a faded kimono sweeps fallen leaves into a neat pile. She gives you a polite nod, but says nothing. In Kyoto, strangers can be courteous without ever inviting conversation. By midday, the streets are warmer and busier. A group of children in matching indigo jackets hurry past you, each carrying a small wooden tablet inscribed with writing. They're headed to a Terakoya, a temple school where they'll learn reading, writing, and arithmetic. Education here is surprisingly widespread for the era, though. What's taught often depends on your class and future role. You pause to watch a woodblock printer at work, pressing inked blocks onto crisp sheets of paper. His hands move quickly, but precisely, each motion a small dance he's repeated thousands of times. He's printing an illustrated guide to the city, a bestseller among travelers and locals alike. You consider buying one, but then remember that carrying it around might scream tourist louder than your already foreign face. Back at your lodging, you set the bucket of water down by the kitchen and take a moment to rest. Outside, the clack of Geta sandals and the low murmur of conversation create a gentle, constant hum. Kyoto may not rush the way Edo does, but it never truly stops either. Life here is a quiet balancing act between tradition and commerce, between elegance and practicality, between the beauty of the moment and the uncertainty of tomorrow. You can feel the city pulling you deeper in. The afternoon in Kyoto feels different, slower, warmer, and laced with that faint golden light that makes every roof tile and wooden beam look like it belongs in a painted screen. You've just stepped back out into the streets after your brief rest, and the first thing you notice is how the soundscape has shifted. The morning's market chatter has faded, replaced by the rhythmic thunk of mallets from a nearby carpenter's shop, and the gentle slosh of water as a woman rinses vegetables. In a shallow roadside channel, you decide to head toward the Kano River, which snakes through the city like a long, glimmering ribbon. The path there takes you through a mix of residential lanes and bustling crossroads. On one corner, a group of men are bent over a game of Go, their faces tight with concentration. A younger boy stands nearby, holding a parasol over them, more to keep the sun off the board than to shade the players. The stones click sharply as each move is placed. Historians still argue whether Go was more of a mental exercise for warriors, or simply the 17th century equivalent of scrolling social media for hours. But in this city, it's both serious pastime and subtle social theater. You cross a small bridge and find yourself at the riverbank. The air smells faintly of mud and wet grass, and the surface of the water is broken by the occasional darting silver of a fish. A couple of fishermen stand ankle-deep, their lines cast in slow, deliberate arcs. You notice one has tied a little paper charm to his rod for luck, a talisman from a nearby shrine. It's said that charms blessed at certain temples can help with everything from better harvests to curing toothaches. Whether they work or not is anyone's guess, but no one wants to be the one who didn't try. Along the river's edge, a line of laundry flaps lazily in the breeze, mostly plain cottons, but here and there a flash of dyed silk peeks out. A few children play in the shallows, squealing when the cold water splashes over their legs. One boy tries to catch a frog, misses, and falls backward into the shallows, sending up a spray of droplets. His friends howl with laughter, and an elderly man sitting on a rock nearby grins, shaking his head. A little farther downstream, you spot a cluster of women kneeling by low baskets, wincing long strands of something pale yellow. You soon realize it's kudzu root starch, being washed and sifted to make a delicacy for cooling summer sweets. One woman notices your curious stare and offers you a small bowl of chilled kuzumaki soft, jelly-like, and dusted with roasted soybean flour. It's delicate, almost ghostly on the tongue, and a perfect antidote to the sun's heat. She smiles knowingly as you finish it in 3 bites. Heading back toward the main street, you pass a tiny shrine wedged between 2 larger buildings. A fox statue, worn smooth by centuries of rain, sits at its entrance. Someone has tied a bright red bib around its neck. The bib is spotless, clearly replaced, often a sign of reverence. The shrine's offering box contains coins, rice, and what looks suspiciously like a piece of dried fish. Kyoto's streets are full of these small, half-hidden spiritual spaces, each one an unspoken thread in the city's weave dock. By now, the smell of something frying is drifting toward you. You follow it to a small food stall where an older man is, pulling golden discs from a pan of oil. He tells you they're imoyaki sweet potato fritters. He serves you one on a scrap of paper, and it's crisp at the edges, soft in the middle, and just sweet enough to feel indulgent. He laughs when you burn your tongue on the first bite and assures you that pain means it's fresh. The sun has started to angle lower, and the light takes on that honeyed quality that Kyoto seems to have trademarked. You wander into a small artisan street where metal workers shape delicate tea scoops, and a woman with a brush as fine as a strand of hair paints tiny seasonal scenes onto ceramic cups. She works in near silence, pausing only to adjust her grip or blow gently on the still wet ink. You wonder how many years it took to gain that kind of precision. She doesn't look up when you pass, but you notice the tiniest quirk of a smile on her lips. A few streets away, you find yourself in front of a bathhouse. The wooden facade is plain, but the faint curls of steam rising from the vents are enough to pull you inside. You pay your small entry fee and step into a world of heat and wood and the constant sound of water. The bath is divided into sections. The water fed by heated wells, with the mineral-rich steam curling up in translucent veils. You lower yourself into the heat slowly, your muscles unwinding almost immediately. In Edo period Kyoto, a public bath isn't just about cleanliness. It's where gossip travels faster than the water flows. One man beside you is telling a story about a samurai who got into a duel over a spilled bowl of noodles. Another insists he once saw a ghost near the Gion district, pale as rice paper, hair streaming like ink in water. The younger bathers snicker, but no one outright dismisses him. In this city, superstition is woven so tightly into daily life that even skepticism has a polite edge. When you finally emerge, skin flushed and loose-limbed, the streets outside have shifted again. Lanterns are beginning to glow in doorways, and the air carries the mixed scents of grilled fish and fresh tatami straw. You head toward your lodging through streets that hum like a living thing, Kyoto's heart beating slow and steady. as it has for centuries. Evening in Kyoto during the Edo period doesn't just arrive, it seeps in. A slow darkening that begins at the edges and folds itself inward. The sun dips low behind the mountains, painting the sky with faint streaks of rose and indigo, and the city's narrow streets take on a different personality. The warmth of the day still lingers in the wooden walls, but the air is cooler now, laced with the faint smell of smoke from cooking fires. You make your way toward one of the larger streets where oil paper lanterns begin to flicker to life in front of tea houses and shops. Their warm glow softens the hard edges of shadows, and the faint rustle of silk whispers through the air as women in finely patterned kimono slip quietly between doorways. A man in a half-opened haori coat calls out to a friend across the street, his voice carrying over the sound of a shamisen being tuned somewhere nearby. The notes hang in the air, plucked and tentative, like someone stretching before a long walk. On a corner, a food stall is doing brisk business selling skewers of grilled chicken yakitori, its smoke curling upward in fragrant ribbons. You sidle up, order one, and feel the faint tackiness of the sweet soy glaze stick to your fingers. The vendor nods approvingly when you inhale sharply at the heat. He tells you the chicken comes from a small farm just outside the city, raised on millet and scraps of garden greens. Whether that's true or just sales talk doesn't matter. It's delicious. Farther along, you pass a storyteller's stall. A man sits cross-legged, surrounded by a small crowd of children and a few adults, pretending they're just passing by. His voice is low and steady, rising only at the moments of danger or mischief in the tale. Tonight, he's recounting the exploits of a clever merchant who tricked a corrupt official out of his ill-gotten fortune. Historians still argue whether these oral tales were based on real events or entirely invented, but either way, they serve as Kyoto's unofficial news outlet, plus a reminder that wit often trumps strength. Turning down a side street, you catch sight of a narrow canal reflecting the lantern light like molten gold. Two geisha glide across a small wooden bridge, their hair ornaments catching the faintest shimmer from the lamps. You can hear the delicate clink of their kanzashi hairpins and the measured swish of their garments as they disappear into a tea house. The moment is so perfectly framed it feels staged, though of course it isn't. Kyoto just does that sometimes. You wander toward the Gion district, where the night is thicker and the air carries the scent of incense mixed with sake. Musicians play from behind sliding doors, their melodies drifting out like perfume. Somewhere, a burst of laughter breaks through, followed by the quick slide of a door being shut, privacy reasserting itself. Small stand at the edge of the district catches your eye. It's selling a mosaic sugar sculptures shaped into animals, flowers, even tiny kabuki masks. The artisan works quickly, pulling and twisting the hot syrup into delicate forms before it cools. You buy a small crane, its wings spread mid-flight. It's almost too pretty to eat. Almost as the evening deepens, You stumble upon a group of Ronin masterless samurai sharing a bottle of cheap sake on the riverbank. They're talking loudly, one telling a story about how he once worked for a lord so obsessed with tea ceremony that he would weigh the steam rising from the kettle to judge the pour. The others laugh, but you notice the edge in their voices. Life without a master is uncertain, and though they joke now, each man's eyes carry the restless flicker of someone looking for the next step. Back in the busier streets, a group of vendors are setting up for the night market. Small tables grown under piles of lacquerware, fans, wooden combs, and trinkets carved from bone or bamboo. One stall sells nothing but old coins from various provinces, each one with a story the seller is more than happy to invent for you. Another displays paper charms said to ward off sickness, theft, or heartbreak. Whether you believe it or not, you find yourself slipping one into your sleeve, just in case. You take a detour through a quieter alley and nearly walk into a procession. 4 men carry a small, ornately decorated palanquin, its occupant hidden behind embroidered curtains. A pair of torchbearers light the way, and the smell of burning pine resin fills the air. The procession passes without incident, but you're left with the faint impression you've glimpsed something important. Though no one around you offers an explanation got by now, the city feels like it's humming alive in a way that's different. From the bustle of day, conversations are lower, movement slower, but every corner seems to hold something quietly significant. You realize that in Kyoto, night isn't the end of the day, it's a different chapter entirely. One that trades the noise of commerce for the soft conspiracies of shadows and lamplight. You make your way back toward your lodging, passing one last street where an elderly man is sweeping fallen leaves into a neat pile. He nods as you pass, and in that simple gesture, you feel the city acknowledging you, not as a tourist, not as a stranger, but as someone who, for tonight at least, belongs here. Morning comes earlier than you'd like in Edo period Kyoto, especially if you stayed out late wandering lantern-lit streets. The sound that wakes you isn't a rooster, it's the rhythmic thud of a wooden pestle pounding rice for Machi Inn, a nearby courtyard. You open your eyes to the muted light filtering through the shiji screens, the paper panels softly glowing like frosted glass. The air is cool, carrying that faint tummy smellgrass, dust, and something comfortably old. Stepping outside, you're greeted by the quiet choreography of a city already in motion. Merchants pull open their shop fronts, setting out wares in precise arrangements. Fishmongers stack shimmering mackerel in neat rows over crushed ice, while a tofu seller ladles fresh curds into wooden tubs. A young boy runs past you with a basket of steaming buns balanced on his shoulder, leaving behind a trail of sweet bean scent. Kyoto's markets are the city's beating heart in the morning. You follow the flow toward Nishiki Market, which even in this era is already famous for its variety. The stalls are narrow, but every inch is used barrels of pickled vegetables in all shades of green, trays of grilled eel, bunches of herbs you can't identify, but whose smell makes your stomach growl. An elderly vendor presses a sample of yatsuhashi into your hand, a soft cinnamon-scented rice cake that practically melts on your tongue. You decide you need 6 more. Alongside the staples are more unusual finds. A stall sells dried river fish, strung like ornaments. Another offers powdered green tea in ceramic jars sealed with wax. You pause at one table where the merchant is hawking medicinal powders that, according to his enthusiastic pitch, can cure headaches, bad dreams, and heartbreak. Historians still argue whether these powders were harmless placebos or potentially dangerous concoctions, but the vendor's confidence alone is almost convincing. You politely decline your stomach's more interested in grilled things than powdered things. As the sun climbs, the streets grow warmer and the smells richer. You wander into a small side lane where a craftsman is already at work on a length of indigo cloth. He dips it into a deep vat, pulls it out dripping dark blue, and twists it expertly to create a swirling tie-dye pattern. The smell of the dye is sharp, earthy. He notices your interest and mutters about the fickleness of color, how the same batch of dye can produce completely different shades depending on humidity, water quality, and luck. You make a note to remember that in case anyone accuses you of inconsistency in the future. Further along, you pass a group of children playing menko, slamming small, decorated cards against the ground in hopes of flipping their opponent's piece. They shriek in triumph or groan in defeat with all the seriousness of grown gamblers. One boy pauses to examine you before asking if you've ever played. You admit you haven't, and he promptly declares you unfit for play, which earns a burst of giggles from his friends. As the market thins, the smell of fresh bread draws you toward a small stall run by a man in a linen cap. He's selling Carinto deep-fried brown sugar snacks that he insists will last for weeks. Given your late-night tendency to snack, you're pretty sure they'll last an afternoon at best. Not all the streets are busy. You cut through a quieter alley and spot a Buddhist monk in saffron robes sweeping the path outside a small temple. The sound of his broom rushing against the stones is oddly calming. He greets you with a bow, and though he doesn't invite conversation, the serenity in his face lingers in your mind long after you've passed. On the way back toward your lodging, you're stopped by a man carrying a long pole balanced across his shoulders, with baskets hanging from each end. One basket is filled with vegetables, the other with live ducks. He offers you one for what seems like a suspiciously low price. You pass, not entirely convinced you could explain a live duck to your host. By mid-morning, the sun is higher, the streets are louder, and you feel the day pulling you toward its busier rhythm. The city hums with transactions and greetings, with gossip about distant provinces, and with the metallic ring of a blacksmith's hammer shaping tools and blades. In some hidden workshop, Kyoto in daylight is an intricate weave of necessity and ritual, each person fitting into a pattern older than themselves. You can't help but feel that in a place like this, even buying a cabbage feels like participating in something quietly significant, something that will outlast you, just as it has outlasted countless others before. By midday, The heat in Kyoto settles into that still, heavy kind of warmth that makes the air feel almost tangible. The pale sunlight glints off the tiled roofs, and the stone-paved streets radiate a slow, stored-up heat from the morning. You decide it's the perfect time to stop thinking about errands and start thinking about lunch. In the Edo period, meals aren't exactly grab and go. You head toward a narrow side street where the scent of charcoal smoke hangs in the air. A Norn curtain, faded from the sun, sways slightly in front of a tiny eatery. Inside, the seating is just a few low stools around a counter, and the only decoration is a single painted fan hanging above the grill. The chef, wearing a short-sleeved happy coat, nods as you sit. You order grilled river fish and a small bowl of miso soup. The fish is skewered and roasted over glowing coals, its skin blistering into a crisp, salty shell. The soup's aroma is deep and savory, with just a hint of seaweed. Each bite feels like the edible equivalent of that sigh you let out when slipping. Into a hot bath. At the next seat, an older man tells you with great authority that the fish you're eating is the healthiest food in the world. Historians still argue whether Edo period diets were as healthy as nostalgic tales suggest, but you can't deny you feel better after finishing the last bite. After lunch, you wander toward the Kamo River. The banks are dotted with women, rinsing vegetables in the shallows, children skipping stones, a fisherman casting his line from a shaded spot. The river's gentle current carries along bits of leaves and the occasional drifting feather. You pause to watch two women kneeling at the water's edge, dyeing fabric. They work in rhythm, dunking, wringing, and laying the cloth to dry on. The grass. One of them glances up and grins at you, her hands stained blue to the wrists. Crossing a small wooden bridge, you pass a group of young samurai in casual dress. They're leaning against the railing, talking in low voices. One of them is idly carving a piece of wood with a short blade. You notice his expression calm, but with a flicker of watchfulness in his eyes, the kind that comes from living in a city where a wrong word can still cause trouble. You keep walking, pretending not to overhear. Back on the main street, the scent of something sweet pulls you toward a tea house. This one is larger, with sliding doors open to the street, so that the warm air mixes with the faint smell of roasted tea leaves. You sit on a cushion while a server in a pale kimono sets down a tray with matcha and wagashi, small, beautiful sweets shaped like flowers. The matcha is bitter and frothy, but paired with the soft sweetness of the bean paste, it's perfect. You remember the merchant at the morning market claiming his tea was the only true Kyoto tea, and smile clearly. He hadn't visited here. Near the tea house, you notice a small stall with an unusual display, folded paper figures dangling from strings, turning gently in the breeze. The vendor, a wiry man with nimble fingers, demonstrates how a flat square of paper becomes a crane in less than a minute. He tells you that folding 1,000 cranes grants you a wish. You briefly consider starting right then, but remember, you've never even folded one without accidentally creating something that looked like a tragic bat, Farther along, the street narrows and the crowd thins. You come upon an apothecary, the shelves lined with jars of dried herbs, roots, and powders. The shop smells like a mixture of incense, earth, and something faintly medicinal. A customer is negotiating for powdered deer antler, which, according to the apothecary, will increase vitality. Historians still debate whether this was an effective remedy or just a clever way to sell antlers. But the confidence in the pitch is impressive. The afternoon light shifts, filtering through wooden lattice and making the dust in the air glow like tiny flecks of gold. Somewhere nearby, a shamisen player plucks a lazy melody. You pause in the street just to listen, the sound threading through the warm air. A little girl with her hair in two loops runs past, chasing after a dog with a red cloth tied around its neck. The dog dodges neatly between your legs, and the girl skids to a stop, bowing quickly before tearing off again. By now, the heat has softened into a more forgiving warmth, and your stomach has begun to think about dinner. But before that, there's time to wander a little more, to see how Kyoto's rhythm slows before evening takes over, when shadows stretch long and lanterns begin to flicker into life. The late afternoon in Kyoto has a kind of magic to it. The light turns liquid gold, spilling across roof tiles and catching on the edges of paper lanterns that hang above shop doors. You wander through the streets as shadows stretch in voices, grow softer, as though the city itself is easing into a gentler mood. It's around now that the scent of charcoal and sizzling skewers drifts more heavily through the air. Vendors begin setting up for the evening, their makeshift stalls glowing under small oil lamps. A young boy calls out the day's offerings: grilled squid, steaming bowls of soba, skewered dumplings brushed with a glossy soy glaze. You pass him with a nod, knowing you'll likely circle back later when your stomach has stopped pretending it's full from lunch. Your path leads you into a district where the street widens and the buildings are slightly taller, their upper floors peering over the crowd below. The sound of shamisen strings, light laughter, and the clink of sake cups spills from behind latticed facades. Here, the entertainment world of Edo period Kyoto reveals itself. A group of geisha glide past, their silk kimono whispering against the ground. Their hair is a precise sculpted work of art, held in place by ornate pins. Each step they take is small and deliberate, their white-painted faces serene. One catches your eye and offers the smallest of smiles before disappearing into a doorway, lit by warm lamplight. Historians still argue whether the geisha's role in this period was strictly as entertainers, or something more complex: social companions, cultural guardians, quiet power brokers. But in this moment, they move like living poetry. You're tempted to follow, but instead, curiosity pulls you toward a yukasho, a narrow alley, crammed with food stalls and tiny bars. The air is thick with scents: grilled chicken fat crackling, miso broth steaming, sweet sake warming in clay flasks. You find a seat at a counter no wider than your forearm, where the chef wears a towel tied neatly around his head. He sets a bowl of oden in front of you, chunks of radish, boiled egg, and fish cakes soaking in a rich, savory broth. The first sip sends heat all the way to your fingertips. As you eat, you overhear two men discussing a kabuki performance from earlier in the day. They argue over whether the lead actor truly captured the spirit of the hero, each insisting their interpretation is the correct one. Their animated gestures nearly tip over a sake flask. You make a mental note to attend a kabuki play before your time in Kyoto runs out, if only to form your own opinion to argue about later. Leaving the alley, you're drawn by the muffled thud of a drum. It leads you to a small square where a troupe of street performers has gathered a crowd. One man balances on a bamboo pole, swaying dangerously before hopping down into a perfectly timed somersault. Another juggles wooden mallets, his face painted in exaggerated expressions that make the crowd roar with laughter. You spot a performer with a monkey wearing a tiny vest. The animal bows deeply after each trick, collecting coins in a lacquered bowl. A little further along, you come to a sake shop. Wooden barrels are stacked outside, each marked with calligraphy. Inside, the air smells faintly sweet, with an undercurrent of fermentation. The owner offers small wooden cups of warm sake, explaining the difference between brews from different regions. You try one from nearby Fushimi Light, smooth and with a faint rice aroma that lingers pleasantly. The shopkeeper leans in, conspiratorially, to tell you it's absolutely the best sake in all of Japan. You suspect that, much like the tea merchants earlier, every sake seller says the same thing. Outside again, lanterns have begun to glow fully, each casting a warm halo on the ground. The crowd shifts toward a larger building at the corner. You realize it's a theater, its painted banners fluttering in the evening breeze, depicting bold, stylized faces from the day's kabuki play. The entrance buzzes with chatter, and you catch a few fragments of gossip about the actors. Some people are clearly there for the art. Others are simply there to be seen. As night thickens, the air cools just enough to make the warmth of the lantern-lit streets feel welcoming. You stroll slowly, not wanting to miss any small detail. A girl running ahead with a bundle of fresh taiyaki, the rhythmic tap of a shamisen player's fingers, the way the paper lanterns sway gently above your head. Kyoto's evening hum feels timeless, as though the same patterns of food, laughter, and music have been playing out here for centuries. You pass one last stall before heading toward your lodging. It's selling small charms and wooden talismans, each promising some kind of luck, health, love, fortune in business. You pick one carved with a character for safe travels, thinking it might be useful for the rest of your journey. With the day drawing to a close, you're reminded of something you overheard earlier from a stall owner. Kyoto never really sleeps. It just dreams with its eyes open. You suspect he might be right. The next morning begins with a faint mist over the Kamo River, blurring the line between water and sky. You wake to the sound of temple bells, their deep, resonant chime vibrating through the air like a slow heartbeat. Your lodging's paper. Screens slide open to reveal the pale dawn light, and somewhere nearby, the sharp toque of a wooden clapper calls monks to their morning prayers. You decide to start your day not with the bustle of the market, but in the stillness of a temple. Following the bell tones, you make your way through narrow lanes until the towering gate of Kainin comes into view. Its dark timber beams are massive, and the worn stone steps feel like they've absorbed centuries of quiet footsteps. You join. A few locals making their way inside, some carrying offerings, others simply seeking a peaceful start. Inside the main hall, the air smells faintly of sandalwood incense. Monks in saffron and deep brown robes move in unison, chanting sutras that ripple like waves. The low melodic tones resonate in your chest. You sit near the back, listening, the rhythm pulling you into a kind of waking dream. It's easy to forget the outside world here. Historians still argue whether these early Edo Buddhist gatherings were more about sincere religious practice or maintaining community identity in changing times. But either way, the effect on you is the same. Grounding dot after the service, you explore the temple grounds. A gardener, kneeling with careful posture, tends to a patch of moss as though each clump were a precious gem. You pass a small pond where koi drift lazily, their scales flashing in shades of gold and white. The stillness is broken only by the occasional plop of a fish breaking the surface. A sign warns against feeding them, though the fish still gather expectantly whenever a shadow falls across the water dot. You leave the temple and follow a winding path toward Higashiyama. Here, the streets narrow again, and the buildings lean in. Close, their tiled roofs nearly brushing one another. Shops open slowly, an old man sweeping the front step of his tea house, a woman arranging fans in a neat display. The fans catch your attention, each hand painted with delicate scenes. Cranes in flight, pine trees bending in the wind, seasonal flowers in impossible detail. The shopkeeper explains that such fans aren't merely for cooling yourself there. Also used in dance, in ceremonies, and occasionally as discreet tools of flirtation dot as you move on. A faint metallic clanging drifts down the lane. You follow it to a small forge where a blacksmith is already hard at work. Sparks spray in brief bursts as his hammer strikes glowing metal. He's shaping a slender kitchen knife, the blade's edge bright against the dark steel. The air smells faintly of hot iron and burning charcoal. He tells you his family has been making blades for 3 generations, and that a truly good knife isn't just sharp, it has a soul. Whether that's craftsmanship or just the sales pitch, you can't say dot by midday, the streets grow busier. Vendors selling sweet yatsuhashi pastries pass out free samples, the cinnamon scent curling through the air. A group of children dash past carrying bamboo hoops, laughing as they race them down the hill. You pause at a tea shop for a light lunch, thick slices of rolled omelette, a small mound of pickled vegetables, and steaming green tea, so fresh it tastes almost grassy dot. Your afternoon takes you toward the Imperial Palace Gardens, which sprawl like a green jewel at the city's center. The gravel paths crunch softly underfoot as you pass towering pines and manicured shrubs. A heron stands perfectly still in the shallows of a pond, so unmoving you wonder if it's carved from stone. You spot a pair of guards in subdued, but still ornate uniforms. The Tokugawa shogunate may hold political power, but the emperor remains a revered figure, and his residence is guarded accordingly. Near the edge of the garden, you come across a small group gathered around a storyteller. His voice rises and falls in an almost theatrical rhythm, weaving a tale about a wandering samurai who saves a village from bandits, only to vanish into the mountains without a word. The audience listens raptly, though you suspect the story changes. With each telling, the storyteller catches your eye at one point and gives a conspiratorial wink, as though letting you in on the fact that maybe, just maybe, it's all made up. The sun starts to tilt westward, and you feel that familiar Kyoto shift toward evening. You cross the Kamo River on a wooden bridge, pausing to watch children tossing pebbles into the water. Downstream, a fisherman in a straw hat stands waist-deep, casting his net in a smooth, practiced arc. You recall overhearing someone say that river fishing here isn't just about food, it's also a test of patience, a quiet art form in itself. By the time you return toward the main streets, the lanterns are beginning to glow again. You duck into a small shop that sells nothing but incense, the shelves lined with neat bundles of sandalwood, a loose wood, and rarer blends with names like evening plum and moonlit bamboo. The shopkeeper invites you to inhale each scent, her voice low as if speaking too loudly might scare the fragrances away. As night finally settles, you realize how different Kyoto feels depending on where you choose to walk. Morning was quiet devotion, afternoon was open gardens, and now the city is once again preparing for its nightly hum of food, music, and small, warm lights against the darkness. You head back to your lodging with the faint scent of incense clinging to your sleeves, wondering what tomorrow will reveal. You wake before sunrise, stirred not by bells this time, but by the hollow toke-toke of a wooden mallet striking wood. At first, you think it's another temple ritual, but as you step outside, the crisp air bites at your face, and you realize it's a carpenter starting work early. His shop smells of fresh-cut cedar, and the rhythmic hammering has a strangely soothing quality, like a heartbeat for the city itself. Today, you decide to explore Kyoto's craft quarters, where the city's artisans shape everyday life as much as its nobles or monks. The streets here are less polished than those near the temples, the paving stones uneven, the buildings more utilitarian. But there's a charm in the clutter half-finished goods spilling from doorways. Scraps of fabric, wood shavings, and even broken pottery waiting to be recycled. Your first stop is a textile workshop, its sliding doors open to let in the pale gold of early morning. Inside, a row of weavers sits cross-legged before wooden looms, their hands moving with a speed that makes your eyes struggle to keep up. Silk threads catch the light, shimmering between pale lavender and deep indigo, depending on the angle. A woman explains that this is Nishiya Jinori, a weaving style Kyoto is famous for, used in the most luxurious kimono. Historians still argue whether Nishijin truly began in the 5th century or was a later Edo refinement, but either way, the patterns are mesmerizing, like landscapes compressed into fabric. A few streets over, you find a pottery studio. The potter sits low to the ground, a simple wheel spinning before him. His hands are coated in wet clay, fingers coaxing the shape of a tea bowl into existence. You watch as he pauses to sprinkle ash into the glaze, explaining that it will melt in the kiln to form tiny glassy speckles imperfections. He insists that make each piece unique. One shelf holds dozens of finished bowls, no two exactly the same, some leaning slightly as if caught mid-sigh. You suspect modern collectors would pay small fortunes for them, but here they'll just serve matcha until they chip, and then they'll be replaced. As you continue, the air changes thicker, warmer, carrying the smell of burnt sugar. A candy maker is already at work, kneading a glossy amber lump of sugar on a wooden board. With quick hands, he stretches and folds it, creating thin, even strips. He cuts a few into animal shapes, a rabbit, a crane, and sells them to children who clutch them like treasure before inevitably taking a bite. You're tempted, but a stray memory of a toothache back home reminds you to pass by mid-morning. You reach an alley filled with lacquerware shops. Here, bowls, trays, and combs gleam with a black or red finish, so deep you could almost fall into it. One craftsman invites you to run a fingertip over the surface. It's like touching still water. He tells you each piece takes weeks, sometimes months, to complete, with layer after layer of lacquer, applied and polished until flawless. Then, almost as an afterthought, he adds that the lacquer comes from tree sap and harvesting it involves slicing into the bark, much like you would tap a maple. For some reason, that detail makes you appreciate the work even more. It's a collaboration between human patience and tree generosity. You pause for lunch in a small soba shop, the kind with only 3 tables and a single elderly cook. As soba noodles are served cold, with a dipping sauce fragrant with green onions and wasabi. The cook watches you try the first bite, nodding slightly when you slurp loud enough to be acceptable. Somewhere in the corner, a cat curls in a sunbeam, utterly uninterested in customers. Afterward, you follow the sound of laughter to a nearby street performance. A group of men in bright festival jackets are practicing a lion dance, the wooden lion heads snapping open and shut as the performers duck and sway. One of them tells you it's for an upcoming Matsuri, a celebration that can last several days. In Edo period Kyoto, such festivals were more than just entertainment. They were moments when the rigid social hierarchy relaxed, if only slightly. Merchants could rub shoulders with samurai, children could roam freely, and everyone could forget the shogunate's rules for a little while. As the afternoon light grows long, you make your way toward a workshop where wooden cones are carved. The master artisan here has a collection ranging from plain and functional to combs, inlaid with delicate mother-of-pearl designs. He tells you, with a sly grin, that in the past, a particularly fine comb could serve as a romantic gift, half practical, half personal, with the promise that the recipient might think of you every morning. You file that away as both sweet and slightly manipulative. The day ends at the riverbank, where you see another kind of craft boat building. Two men are bending long planks into the hull of a small fishing vessel, steam rising from the wood, to make it pliable. A work in near silence, communicating only with brief nods, as though the river itself is listening. The boats here aren't large, but they're built to last, able to glide over the shallow, stone-strewn riverbeds without complaint. By the time you turn back toward your lodging, the streets are quieter. The artisans close their shutters. There, work done for the day, and the scent of sawdust, lacquer, and boiled sugar fades into the cool evening air. The crafts you saw today aren't just products. They're the threads that weave Kyoto together, each one holding a little piece of its soul. And as you step through your doorway, you wonder if, hundreds of years from now, someone might walk these same streets and feel exactly what you do right now. You wake to the faint clatter of wooden wheels outside merchant carts rumbling down the street, their drivers calling out prices in voices already hoarse from early morning shouting. Today is market day, and you decide to follow the sound toward the heart of the city's commercial life. The street broadens as you approach the main marketplace, and the air grows heavier with the scent of fried batter, fresh fish, and warm rice. The stalls spill into the road in a cheerful chaos, merchants jostling for space, fabrics fluttering overhead like makeshift flags, and the low hum of bargaining mixing with the occasional laugh or sharp retort. You start at a fishmonger's stall, where trays of silver-skinned sardines glint under the morning sun. A vendor, hands wet from rinsing his catch, lifts up a live eel, its body twisting like an angry ribbon. He explains that eel is prized both as food and as medicine, believed to give stamina perfect for sweltering summer days. Historians still argue whether the custom of eating eel on the hottest days began here in Kyoto or was imported from Edo itself. Either way, you're not entirely convinced your stomach is ready for something still wriggling. Nearby, a spice merchant has baskets of dried citrus peel, ginger, sesame seeds, and bright red chili peppers. The aroma hits you in a wave sharp, warm, and just a little sweet. He sprinkles some powdered shichimi blend into your palm. Chili, sansho pepper, sesame, and other secret ingredients. You taste it cautiously, and the heat blooms slowly before spiking right behind your eyes. You cough, and he chuckles, clearly pleased. Moving deeper into the market, you pass stalls selling dried seaweed bundled into neat rectangles, ceramic jars of fermented miso, and baskets of pickled vegetables so brightly colored they look more like festival decorations than food. One seller holds up a pink, almost neon slice of pickled radish and swears it's the secret to long life. You suspect he says that about everything on his stall, but the market isn't just food. There are household goods too. You find a stall where a blacksmith is selling knives, their edges so sharp they seem to shimmer. He lets you feel the balance of one in your hand, explaining how a good blade should feel like an extension of your arm. A few steps away, a woman sells brooms made from tightly bound grass. She demonstrates their strength by sweeping up a patch of dust in one stroke, looking smug as she does it at one corner of the marketplace. Musicians have set up with shamisen and taiko drums. The music pulls in a small crowd, children clapping along, an elderly man swaying gently. You linger, watching as a vendor in the back uses the beat to time his candy pulling. He twists and folds molten sugar with a flourish like a magician, revealing a trick. Mid-morning brings a sudden change in the air, the slow clang of a handheld gong. Everyone nearby looks up, and a town official steps into the market square, unrolling a scroll. He reads a public notice in a formal, booming voice, something about new price limits on rice and restrictions on gambling houses. The crowd listens with half interest. You suspect this is more a formality than a serious warning. Someone mutters under their breath about taxes, and a few nod in agreement. Public dissatisfaction is universal. You think, no matter the century by. Now, you've seen enough to know the market is as much about gossip as it is about goods. Merchants lean over counters to trade news who's fallen ill, which noble is hosting a poetry gathering, what the weather will be like for the next festival. A small circle of people gathers around a storyteller who, with animated gestures, recounts a tale about a fox spirit tricking a samurai. Whether the story is true doesn't matter. Everyone's laughing, and that's the point. Feeling adventurous. You try a snack from a fried food stall, something like a savory pancake, crisp at the edges, soft in the middle, topped with shaved bonito that dances in the steam. You take a bite and burn your tongue, trying to act cool about it, while the vendor smirks knowingly. By late afternoon, the crowds thin as merchants pack up. Some of the leftover goods go to street children, who dart in and out between stalls, quick as shadows. You notice the unsold fish being salted down for preservation, the vegetables wrapped in straw mats for transport. Nothing is wasted. In a city like Kyoto, everything gets a second life. As the last carts creak away, you take one last look over your shoulder. The market square seems strangely bare, without the noise and color, as if someone has drained it of its pulse. But you know by this time tomorrow, it will throb with life again, just as it has for centuries. And maybe you think if you spent enough mornings here, you'd start to feel less like an outsider and more like one of the many voices that give this city its rhythm. The air is cooler tonight, and as you wander through the dim streets, you catch the faint scent of burning cedar drifting over the rooftops. You follow it until you reach the edge of a quiet neighborhood, where the rhythmic clang of a wooden block echoes in the distance. It's not a festival, this is the night watch. Kyoto may be beautiful, but in the Edo period, fire is the city's constant enemy. The houses are made almost entirely of wood and paper, and a single overturned lantern can send entire districts up in flames. That's why, after dark, The Heishi Fire Watch patrols walk the streets, keeping an ear out for trouble. You spot a pair of them moving slowly down the road, each wearing a dark Canton coat marked with bold white characters. One carries a long bamboo pole with a hook at the end used to tear down burning walls before flames can spread. The other taps his wooden clapper together in a slow, steady beat, a signal to both reassure residents and warn any troublemakers that the watch is out. They nod at you in passing, but you catch the sharpness in their eyes. These aren't ceremonial guards. They're practical, wary, always ready to run toward danger. Historians still argue whether the Kyoto Heishi were more effective than their Edo counterparts, but everyone agrees they had one advantage. Cities' narrower streets made fires easier to contain if you acted quickly enough. You trail behind them for a while, stepping around the pools of light cast by oil lamps. Occasionally you glimpse shadowy figures slipping into side alleys, maybe late workers heading home, maybe lovers meeting in secret. One of the watchmen glances back as if to check on you. You raise your hands in mock surrender, which earns you a small, amused snort before they turn away again. Further along, you hear raised voices from a side street. The patrol heads toward it without hesitation, and you follow at a careful distance. Two men are arguing over what looks like a spilled basket of chestnuts. Their shouts attract neighbors leaning out of doorways, some eager for the drama, others clearly annoyed. The watchmen don't bark orders or draw weapons. They stand between the men, speaking low and firm until the argument fizzles. One of the watchmen helps gather the chestnuts, while the other makes a dry comment. You can't quite catch, but that makes half the onlookers chuckle. It's not all fire prevention. The Heishi are peacekeepers too. In a city this densely packed, tempers can flare as easily as lantern oil. The night deepens, and you wander toward a small canal. A nearly full moon reflects off the water, silver ripples stretching toward the dark shapes of bridges. Somewhere nearby, a shamisen is being played softly, its plaintive notes curling into the air like smoke. You stop on the bridge to listen, leaning over the railing as a lone heron flaps low over the water. From here, you can see another group of patrolmen on the opposite bank. They're carrying Matoi ornamental fire standards, topped with elaborate symbols. In Edo, Matoi are a rallying point for firefighters, but here in Kyoto, they're mostly ceremonial, used during larger neighborhood watches or parades. Tonight, though, they catch the moonlight like strange metallic flowers, gleaming against the darkness. The streets grow quieter still. You pass a closed tea house with paper lanterns dimmed, their painted characters barely visible. A stray cat darts past, its tail flicking high before it vanishes into the shadows. You wonder if it belongs to anyone, or if it's one of the dozens that make the streets their kingdom after midnight. You pause when you hear faint chanting in the distance. Following the sound, you find a small group of Buddhist monks walking, in single file, carrying lanterns and softly reciting sutras. Their presence is calming, as if they're not just tending to their own prayers, but somehow cleansing the street they pass through. One of them catches your eye and offers a faint smile before disappearing around the corner. The watchman you met earlier passed by again, this time heading back toward the heart of the city. You realize you've been wandering in a loop, tracing their path in miniature. They seem to know every creak of every gate, every flicker of light in an upstairs window. You start back toward your lodging, the streets so still you can hear your own footsteps on the packed dirt. A breeze carries the faint smell of grilled fish from some late-night snack stall, making your stomach grumble despite the hour. Kyoto at night is not the city you saw in daylight. It's slower, quieter, but also sharper in its edges. Every noise feels significant, every shadow purposeful. And as you slip back inside, sliding the paper door shut behind you, you realize that in this place, safety isn't just a matter of luck. It's a matter of constant, careful watching. Morning comes with a muted gray light seeping through the paper shoshi, and you're woken not by birdsong, but by the clatter of wooden wheels outside. Sliding the door aside, you peek into the street and spot a vendor pushing a cart stacked with shallow wooden trays. A white cloth banner hangs from the side, hand-brushed with bold characters. Fresh tofu. He calls out in a steady rhythm, the long vowels carrying down the street like a chant. It's not just an announcement, it's advertising. Community bulletin and alarm clock all in one. People step out with bowls or small lacquered tubs, exchanging a few coins for cubes of smooth, pale tofu wrapped in wet cloth. This is breakfast Kyoto style in the Edo period. Nothing flashy, but built on simple staples. Your own morning meal is steaming rice, a little miso soup, some pickled radish, and that just purchased tofu, now sliced and sprinkled with green onions. The tofu has a creamy softness that makes you briefly forget you're chewing something that looks like a beige sponge dot as you eat. You watch more street life unfold. A group of children trot past with wooden buckets, heading for the communal. Well, their chatter echoes between the wooden houses, a reminder that water isn't just for drinking, it's for everything, from rinsing rice to dousing accidental fires. Historians still argue whether Kyoto's well systems in the Edo period were better maintained than those in Edo City. But what's certain is that the locals treat water like a precious resource. After breakfast, you decide to join the growing bustle around a small open-air market. It's less about bright colors and more about neat order. Vegetables laid out in tidy bundles, each tied with straw. Fish displayed on boards with wet leaves underneath to keep them fresh. Bundles of charcoal stacked like short black logs at one stall. A woman is selling dried persimmons. She gives you a warm smile, but quickly warns you about the price. These aren't cheap snacks. You buy one anyway, biting into its chewy sweetness. She laughs at the way your expression shifts from skeptical to pleasantly surprised. A few steps away, a man in a worn straw hat is sharpening a blade on a foot-powered grinding wheel. Sparks leap briefly each time the metal meets stone. He doesn't look up until you ask, half joking, if he sharpens kitchen knives or just swords. He answers with a dry, whichever brings more rice to the table, and you can't quite tell if he's serious. The sounds of the market form a strange kind of music vendors calling out prices, coins clinking, bamboo baskets creaking, the occasional chicken squawk. Somewhere, a shamisen player tries to catch attention with a quick, jaunty tune, though most shoppers seem more focused on their errands. From the market, you wander toward a small workshop where artisans are already at work. Through the open, sliding door, you see a man dyeing fabric in deep indigo, pulling it from the vat with long wooden tongs. The steam carries the scent of fermented dye sharp, almost earthy. A young apprentice sits nearby, carefully folding another length of cloth to prepare it for the next dip. The artisan catches you watching and waves you in. You step carefully over the wooden threshold, mindful not to drip water from your sandals. He explains the process with a mix of pride and matter-of-factness, telling you how some patterns require dipping the cloth dozens of times over several days. People think the color is just blue, he says, but there are 50 shades of it if you have the eye for it. You continue down a side street where a woman is pounding rice in a large wooden mortar, making machi. Each thud of the mallet echoes through the narrow alley, and her partner, likely her husband, turns the rice between strikes with quick, practiced movements that make you hold your breath in case of a nestine swing. When you clap at their rhythm, they grin, clearly pleased by the attention. Not all morning activity is cheerful, though. You pass a group of laborers repairing a roof, the tiles piled neatly beside them. Their foreman is barking orders, impatient with the pace. One wrong step, and they could tumble into the street, but they work as if danger is just part of the day docked by late morning. The air has warmed enough for the smell of grilling fish to drift from a tea-house kitchen. You stop for tea, sitting on a low bench while a young server pours the steaming liquid into a ceramic cup. The bitterness cuts through the heat in your mouth from a bite of salted fish. She tells you business has been better lately thanks to more travelers passing through. Kyoto on the Tokaido Road. The tea leaves a faint astringency on your tongue, but the server tops up your cup before you can set it down. It's a simple act, but one that feels like a small kindness in a busy city. By the time you step back outside, the streets are alive in full daylight. Children are playing with paper windmills. Vendors are arguing over stall space. And somewhere, a dog barks in 3 short bursts before going silent again. You catch yourself smiling. Life here isn't romantic in the way the guidebooks, if guidebooks existed, might suggest. But it's vivid, textured, and built on hundreds of small rituals that make the city hum. You drift from the lively market streets toward the district where craftsmen work with wood, lacquer, and bamboo. The air here smells faintly of sawdust, and the rhythmic scrape of planes smoothing timber comes from behind almost every sliding door. You pause outside one workshop where a carpenter sits cross-legged, shaping the leg of a low table. His hands move with an easy confidence, guiding the blade in smooth strokes that curl paper-thin ribbons from the wood. He doesn't measure so much as feel pressing a thumb against the curve, squinting one eye, and nodding as if the table leg has just passed some invisible test. Beside him, a young apprentice polishes a finished piece with Yurashi lacquer. He works slowly, his fingers wrapped in cloth to avoid staining his skin. Yurashi is beautiful once hardened, but raw lacquer can cause nasty rashes. You mention that to the apprentice, and he grins without looking up, saying, "We all itch for the first year." That's dedication, or possibly just poor occupational health. Farther along, you find a bamboo craftsman weaving a basket. The strips snap faintly as he folds them into the frame, his motions hypnotic. A small radio-like box, really just a singing bird in a cage, provides background music. The sound is shrill, but he swears it helps him work. Historians still argue whether these caged songbirds in Kyoto were a status symbol or simply background noise for artisans. Either way, the bird's tune follows you as you step away. Turning a corner, you enter a neighborhood where paper lanterns sway gently in the breeze. A shopkeeper is repainting faded designs onto the white paper. Globes, each stroke deliberate and steady. He's an older man with a back so bent, it's as if he's been leaning over his work for decades. You notice how the bright red characters pop against the pale paper, and he tells you these will hang outside a tea house, hosting a poetry night. The idea of a poetry night intrigues you. But for now, you keep walking, following the smell of something sweet. It leads you to a small stall where a woman is cooking imakwaki round cakes filled with red bean paste. She flips them with wooden paddles, sliding one onto a piece of paper for you. The outside is crisp, the inside molten. You nearly burn your tongue, earning a soft laugh from the vendor. Your path eventually leads toward the Kamagawa River, the sound of rushing water growing louder as you approach. The banks are busy, women washing clothes, fishermen checking nets, children skipping flat stones. A man in a straw raincoat, despite the dry weather, stands knee-deep in the current, scooping water into a wooden tub. When you ask why, he explains that river water gives a better taste to the tofu he makes. Whether that's truth or sales pitch is anyone's guess. Crossing one of the wooden bridges, you pause to watch a small flotilla of cormorant fishermen in the distance. Each bird wears a ring around its neck to prevent it from swallowing large fish, and they dive with remarkable speed. The fishermen guide them with tethers, pulling each bird up to claim the catch. It's a strange, almost medieval sight, but clearly effective. On the far side of the river, you pass into a quieter area where the houses are spaced farther apart. A cluster of cherry trees, not yet in bloom, stands near a small shrine. An old woman sweeps the stone steps, pausing to offer you a nod. You return the gesture, noticing the way her broom made from bound twigs barely stirs the dust, but makes a soothing rustle dot in this neighborhood. Sound carries differently. You can hear the faint ring of a bell from a distant temple, the bark of a dog half a street away, and somewhere the slow, deep beats of a taiko drum from a rehearsal hall. These layered sounds give the place a rhythm entirely separate from the market district's noisy chatter. a passing monk, his head shaved smooth and his robe faded from the sun, stops to speak with you briefly. He tells you the temple nearby is preparing for a seasonal festival, and if you're lucky, you might see the paper lanterns lit at night. His tone suggests it's worth the wait. By the time you turn back toward the city center, the sun has shifted, casting longer shadows across the narrow streets. Your mind lingers on the mix of skill, patience, and artistry you've seen, whether in bamboo, wood, paper, or food. It's as if the city breathes through its crafts, each workshop and stall alone, pulling in raw materials and exhaling beauty. Utility, or sometimes both. And though you've been walking for hours, you realize you've barely scratched the surface of Kyoto's daily life. There's still the question of what happens after dark, when the lanterns are lit and the city hums with a different kind of energy entirely. By the time dusk folds over Kyoto, you find yourself back near the entertainment district. The air is cooler now, with a faint mist rising from the river. Lanterns flicker to life one by one, their warm glow painting the wooden facades in amber. Shadows stretch longer, and the streets begin to hum not with the bustle of daytime commerce, but with an undercurrent of anticipation. You pass a row of tea houses, their sliding doors half open, revealing glimpses of low tables set with porcelain, cups and small lacquer trays. Women in elegant kimono sweep the entryways, their sleeves whispering against the polished wood. The silk shimmers under the lantern light, and the intricate obi knots at their backs look like sculpted works of art. One woman catches you staring and smiles, whether in welcome or amusement is unclear. Inside one tea house, the soft pluck of a shamisen floats into the street. The notes are slow, deliberate, like someone speaking in carefully measured syllables. A geisha appears in the doorway, her white painted face catching the light, eyes framed in deep black liner. Her hair, lacquered into a precise coiffure, gleams like polished ebony. She nods politely, then turns away, leaving you with the lingering scent of incense and faint perfume. Around the corner, you notice a small performance space where a man in a dramatic mask is preparing for a no play. His robe is embroidered, with gold thread catching the lantern glow with every movement. The stage is just a raised wooden platform with a painted pine tree backdrop, yet the atmosphere feels almost sacred. A few locals gather, murmuring softly as the play begins slow. Deliberate steps, a clash of fan and drum, voices that hover between song and chant. Historians still argue whether the pacing was meant to entrance audiences or simply keep the actors from tripping over heavy costumes. You continue deeper into the district, where the crowds thicken. A sake shop offers small wooden cups to passing customers, and you find yourself with one in hand before you can politely refuse. The drink is warm, slightly sweet, and dangerously easy to sip. A man beside you leans in and says, "Best way to forget the taxes." You're not sure if he's joking, but he raises his cup all the same. Further on, a cluster of street performers competes for attention. One man balances on a bamboo pole, swaying alarmingly but never falling. Another juggles lacquered bowls, the hollow toke-toke of wood against wood, punctuating the laughter of children. A third performer has a monkey in a tiny vest that bows to the crowd, though the monkey seems more interested in stealing food from distracted onlookers. You slip down a side alley, where the noise fades slightly, replaced by the rhythmic tap of Geta sandals on the stone. A small eatery is tucked here, its menu painted in bold black calligraphy. The scent of grilled eel drifts from the back, and a chef fans the skewers over glowing charcoal. You accept a plate, savoring the smoky, sweet glaze, the tender meat that flakes under your chopsticks. It's the kind of meal that convinces you. Life in Kyoto might be survivable after all, despite the taxes and possible fires. Short walk brings you to the riverbank again, but now it's transformed. Long strings of lanterns ripple in the breeze, their reflections dancing on the water. Couples stroll hand in hand, merchants exchange quiet words, and a lone fisherman still works the shallows, his cormorants darting in and out of the dark surface like living shadows. Somewhere upstream, a small fireworks display crackles briefly, the colors washing over the river before fading into night dot in this softened glow. The city feels almost suspended in time. You think back to the sharp clatter of the daytime markets, the rasp of carpenters' planes, the press of midday crowds. Now, every sound seems cushioned. The distant strum of shamisen, the rustle of silk, the soft clink of ceramic cups. Even the laughter spilling from the tea houses is low and warm dot as you linger there. It occurs to you that in Kyoto, the day's energy doesn't disappear. It simply changes form. What was trade and labor becomes music and story. What was sunlight and sweat becomes sake and lantern light. And in that transformation, you sense the heartbeat of the city steady, centuries deep, and still very much alive. The streets grow quieter as you wander away from the lantern glow, but Kyoto doesn't sleep just yet. Somewhere in the distance, a drumbeat thumps a slow, steady rhythm. You follow it until you find a small gathering near a temple courtyard. Monks in saffron and gray robes are seated in a circle, their chants rolling out in deep, resonant waves. The incense is thicker here, curling in silver ribbons toward the darkened eaves of the temple. You sit at the edge, feeling the vibration of each chant more than hearing it. The temple bell chimes once, long and low, the sound stretching into the night air until it fades into silence. It's a reminder that Kyoto's spiritual life hums alongside its entertainment, each as much a part of the city's pulse as the other. Historians still argue whether Edo period Kyoto was more devoted to pleasure or piety. But here in this moment, the two seem less like rivals and more like old friends who simply meet in different rooms. Past the temple, the streets become narrower, more residential. Sliding paper doors are closed for the night, and you catch the faint glow of oil lamps behind shoshi screens. Somewhere, a baby cries, then is soothed. A dog barks once, then gives up, deciding sleep is the better option. You pass a small public bathhouse just as its last customers step out into the cool air. Their hair is damp, their wooden buckets swinging from their hands. Steam billows from the doorway, carrying the clean scent of hinoki cypress. You almost join them, but the night is winding down, and you're starting to feel its weight. The last stop before heading back is a small bridge over one of Kyoto's canals. The water here is dark and still, reflecting the moon with uncanny clarity. A lone fisherman sits on the bank, unmoving, as though carved from the same wood as his pole. The air is cooler now, carrying the faint tang of river silt, and the distant smoke from cooking fires gone out. You lean on the railing and let the city's sounds settle into your bones. The shuffle of Geta sandals far away, the muted conversation of two men walking home from the tea house, the soft creak of the bridge's timbers under your weight, all of it blends into a slow, drowsy rhythm. You think about the day you've lived, the market noise, the carpenter's saws, the sake's warm bite, the gleam of silk under lantern light. It's been long, vivid, and full of tiny details that you know will slip into dreams as soon as your head hits the pillow. Somewhere, a night watchman strikes his clapper blocks, the toke-toke carrying down the street, a reminder to keep your lamps safe, to watch for fire, to rest easy knowing someone else is awake. And so you walk back, the city's heartbeat softening with every step. Kyoto in the Edo period has been both relentless and gentle, a place of crowded markets and quiet temples, of laughter and incense, of debts and indulgences. And as you slide the paper door closed behind you, you're already half asleep, the hum of the river outside blending with your breath. Now, let's slow everything down. The streets of Kyoto fade into a blur, the lanterns becoming soft spheres of light drifting in a dark river. You can still hear the faint pluck of a shamisen somewhere, but it's not a song anymore. It's just a slow, warm pulse that rises and falls with your breath. The river beneath the bridge flows a little slower now, as though time itself has decided to stretch and yawn. The air is cooler, the scents gentler, no more sharp smoke or strong sock. Just the faint sweetness of old wood and clean water. Your steps are heavier, not with exhaustion, but with the simple pull of rest. The city is still alive, but its movements are muffled, softened, distant. The last shopkeepers shutter their doors, and even the night watchman's clappers grow less urgent, more like a heartbeat than a warning. Imagine the futon beneath you, the weight of the quilt settling over your body like a warm tide. Outside, the river hums low and constant, its rhythm syncing perfectly with yours. You don't need to hold on to the details of the day anymore. They can drift away like paper lanterns on the water, glowing for a while before disappearing into the night. Kyoto's heartbeat is still there, steady and calm, but it no longer asks you to follow it. It's content to keep the night for itself while you sink deeper, softer, quieter. And so the city fades, and you fade with it. No worries, no noise, just the gentle pull of sleep carrying you away.